Okay, everyone, this is Dan Stafford, and I am here with Ivette Roman-Roberto, and we are both Aquarians of 1962, and this is the first in a series of multiple interviews with Aquarians of 1962, which we like to call ourselves Aquastels. And we're going to start off with myself interviewing Ivette. And we have a prepared list of interview questions, so I'll be going through those. So we'll get started here momentarily. Yvette, anything you'd like to say before we get started into the interview proper?
Oh, I'm ready to start.
Okay. And just for future reference, this is not my normal speaking voice. I've got a pretty rough cold this week, so my voice is kind of doing a bad Bill Clinton imitation. Okay, so Yvette, we're going to go with question one. What is your earliest memory?
My earliest memory is when I was like 3 years old. I have memories of being in the school of an aunt. That she was a teacher, and she took me with her to school. And I have many memories from that school. I have memories from the classroom. She was an English teacher in Puerto
Huh?
Rico, and I remember that I was looking at her teaching. I have memories of myself in the corner of the blackboard, drawing with a chalk, and also in the I have smell memories of the food in of the cafeteria because it had a distinct smell, and I still remember that smell. And also a Halloween party. So those are the closest memory that I have. I mean the oldest memories that I have. And I was like 3 to 4 years old. And also I remember my grandmother teaching me how to read and teaching me how to do crochet. So, so these are like snapshots that I have from my
All right.
childhood.
I was going to ask what course your grandmother was teaching in the school, but you answered that already.
Yes.
Was it English as a second language, do you know, or was it more like English, the subject with literature and etc.?
It was elementary English, and it is English as a second language.
Okay.
And is in Puerto Rico, the curriculum always include an hour of English from kindergarten to 12.
Ah,
Mm,
that's good. That's good.
yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which this is kind of interesting for someone to remember so young, but we'll see where it goes. What is your earliest memory of a sense of nation or a sense of country?
Well, I believe that well, I think it is through my father because my father was very active in various groups, and so he had like a combination of activities in the spiritual sense. So we gathered to meditate and to uh, practice alternative types of spirituality because Even though the island was mostly Catholic, for some reason, in the first 13 years of my childhood, we never went to a Christian church. We explored different types of spiritualities. So, and also he was involved in, so not very much involved, but he went to groups, to a union, and he was involved in the movement of the independence of Puerto Rico, and also community work. That I remember going with him to have like meetings of the community, talking about the situation in the island and things like that. So these are like the oldest memories that I have, always through my father. And it also includes sometimes like playing chess. So they call this type of groups, they call them tertulias, which is a group of people talking and sharing experiences and sharing information about books that they read and things like that.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next one. What was your earliest memory of a sense of mission or purpose?
I always knew that I was going to be an educator and an artist since the very beginning. All my games that I had since childhood were pretending I was a teacher or pretending I was an artist, a performance artist, like singing in front of the mirror or making my own costumes. And also I wrote poetry since I was very little, since I was a little girl. And I had a guitar. I played the guitar and I played an electric organ since I was very little. So it's from the very beginning, I always knew that it was going to be through education and through music that I was going to connect with people and with communities. And I remember that I was also very, very sensitive, and I always wanted to, I always visualized myself working in things that had to do with peace and community. So it was from the very beginning, from elementary years, that I felt that sense of purpose.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'd like to see some of those poems someday. And so, third question. Sorry, this is actually the fourth question. What was the environment like in terms of a support network, family support, school, and governmental support, like when you were growing up?
Well, it was a mix of very positive things and also not so positive. I think that the island at that time was in a prosperity boom. It was very prosperous at that time. So the um, public school was very good. I went to very good public schools, and I was very lucky to get into after the elementary school, I went to a music a school specialized in music, in which I did the regular curriculum plus music, and I studied piano and viola and music theory in the middle school years um, and the high school years. And also, I remember that I started working since 14 years old because there was a government program that allowed teenagers to start working. So after school, I took a public bus, and I went to the Department of Water and the water services of the government, and I did a job in filing documents until my father came around 6 p.m. and picked me up, and we went back to home.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting. I want to clarify for people that are watching this video too, when Ivette is talking about the island, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're talking about the island of Puerto Rico, which is a United States territory and has been for a very long time, which means everyone on that island is a U.S. citizen. So the government she's speaking of would have been the United States government at the federal level, and then the island government at the local level, subject to the
Exactly.
United States.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So entirely the United States, just a different flavor, just like Wisconsin is different from Texas, or New York is different from Seattle. Puerto Rico is different from the mainland United States or from Hawaii, but it's all part of the United States. It's part of this wonderful blend that makes us, stronger, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's go on to the next question, which would be, what was your career life like from the beginning until now? And I think we got a little sense of the very, very, very early beginning
Mm-hmm.
on the last question.
Yes. Well, the beginning was just this program for teenagers, but when I finished my university studies in education, then I started working as an art teacher, and then I decided to move to first to New York and then to Los Angeles because I wanted to explore the art part of the career, and that's the part that I didn't feel supported because the environment where I grew up was very conservative in terms of women, the women role. So all the pressure that I received was to get married and to go through that route. But I feared that if I did that, I would miss the opportunity to explore my vision of being an artist. And I took that chance. It was a very bold chance that it was a decision that was very dramatic because my family didn't understand, and it took them a long time, many years to understand, and they were very ashamed. They were very concerned about what people would say about the family or about me. So it was very, very dramatic, a very serious type of decision. But it was not so dramatic as soon as I moved to um, in Los Angeles. It was when I started doing work in front of an audience. I was able to share what I always did by myself in solitude. So, and I had an audience that liked it. So I felt very, very happy that around age 23, I was already able to live my vision of being an artist. And at that time, Los Angeles, California was very, very kind and very open to support young artists. So I was very lucky to be in the right time, right place, and I felt very supported. So since then, I've been mostly an experimental vocalist. I make music with my voice mostly and improvise, but I also compose sound pieces. And I've been doing that since the 80s, 1980s.
Long time, a lot of experience.
Yes. And I've been doing solos, I've been working with groups. I work with classic musicians and also with jazz musicians and experimental avant-garde music also. And lately, in the past probably 10 years, I've been doing more music with communities, like co-producing pieces or events through the arts, but working with communities that need support and need to get together to address a problem that they have or a concern through music. And this has been my last part of the career, which I believe I feel that is my legacy somehow. It has a feeling of legacy, I would say.
That's good. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing to have, actually.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to ask towards the end of this, would you have a copy of your chart that you'd be able to screen share towards the end of this interview?
Probably I would be able to find it. No, that's sure that I have it, but
We'll take a look at the end. I want to get through the interview first, but
okay.
just keep that in mind towards the end. We'll take a little bit of time for
Okay.
that. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. How did the Cold War impact your perceptions of the world around you? This is referring to the rivalry. Cold War is an interesting term for it, but I would almost call it a very edgy rivalry between the United States and the Soviet, what is it, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or
Mhm.
USSR.
Well, I I was somehow involved in activism during the 80s when I was in New York. I started in New York because a lot of people from Nicaragua and El Salvador had to emigrate to New York and other parts of the United States, and they were protected in the States from the situation of the civil wars that they had during the 80s. So while I was working, I did voluntary work with two organizations, uh, and that's how I got more information, and I was more informed about the situation in going on, which is part of the whole situation during the Cold War. So, and then in Los Angeles, as part of the Latinos, artists, Latino artists in Los Angeles, we also were active in concerts and events or performances that had to do with the war also at the same time. So my involvement was more towards supporting the people that were um, protected in the United States, and facilitating support, emotional support, support through the arts, and giving them a voice and a place to express themselves. So that was in the way that I got involved with the Cold War at that time. I feel I remember that it was a very tense times. They were very tense. There was a lot of as artists and people involved with communities. I think that our mission is to provide a safe place and to help people to regulate their emotions and keep down their anxieties and to express themselves. So this is how I address the situation in those times. So the way that I feel it impacted me was that I was very young, and at that time I was very concerned about the extreme views, the polarization, and how, and that was, I think, that impacted me the most as a person, as a young person, because I didn't have a clue. I didn't know that people could be so polarized in views and ideologies. And also, as a person that believes in peace and harmony and equality, my position was to be active in to be to put in my attention in what makes us human and what makes us connected, more than in what makes us different. So I think that energy, I think it was very important. I think that all the artists did a wonderful job of reminding people of our human condition, that before everything else, we are connected as a family, as a world family. To never lose that perspective.
Okay. So we'll move on to this. What impact did the advent of HIV/AIDS have on your perception of the world?
I think it was similar because the artists at that time were also involved in providing through their art spaces and opportunities to people with HIV to express themselves. So it was a similar position. That the perception was also the same, that because I remember that there was a lot of cruelty towards the community that was um, infected with the HIV virus. And that was very, very sad to see that they were planning to put them aside in another place and separate them from the rest of the population. And also there was an in, an intention of some people in government to silence the artists that were addressing the issue through the arts. So, which also was very, for me, was very impact. It made a lot of impact. It was like I couldn't believe it. You know that there would be people that would try to suppress every single attempt to support this community. But it also was shown that when people get together, we can keep doing the good work regardless.
Interesting. That's a very different perspective than I experienced at the time. It's interesting to hear. Did you experience a dichotomy of choice between an artistic life path and or a mechanical / engineering or traditional career path? And I think you've already answered this question in some respect, but do you want to dive any deeper into that?
Yes, yeah, that was always an issue, because when you are an artist, you just want to do only that. You don't want to be worried about paying a rent or or anything like that. And if you are not a celebrity, a millionaire, a celebrity, you have to have a second job or a day job. So my day job was always in education, which I loved. So I think that I was lucky that I studied um, a career that I really enjoyed and that I could accomplish in many ways, not only as a public school teacher, but also uh, creating curriculums through the arts and working with projects. Um, so somehow I managed it to work together, and not always harmoniously, but it works.
Understood. Okay. So when did you first become aware of esoterica and alternate spiritual paths? And I think you kind of dived into this one a little bit too, because it seems to be very early in life for you.
Yes, I was born into that into that uh, trend in the island. It was a very small group, because the majority of people in the island, as I told you before, were Catholics. So it was a small group of people that were exploring with alternative spiritualities. And I believe that it had to do with, at least from the perspective of my father, I have a lot of influence from my father that I'm becoming very aware now as a senior person, that through his perspective, I had this um, idea that religion was supporting a lot of religious groups were supporting totalitarian regimes in Latin America. So they were looking for alternative spiritualities that would allow people to be connected with God, or the whichever the name they wanted them to call God, sometimes the universe or the um, divine fountain of energy, or whichever they wanted to call it, but through an alternative way that was not attached to an ideology. So the spirituality of my father was into the esoterics mostly. He was, I don't know how much involved he was in the Rosacrucians, Rosacruces, and in the Golden Dawn, for example. But I know that there was something about that in the group, because I went to some of the conferences with him, the family conferences. So that they taught about a lot of very interesting things. I was always fascinated with these conferences. I really enjoyed to go with my father to these conferences. But I also went with my father to, because he was following a guru who, his name was Sri Chinmoy, and we did also like mantras and meditations in that group. And then he was following the Maharishi group in Puerto Rico, which was transcendental meditation. So we did a little bit of everything. And that started since I was a very little girl. I was like 3 years old, probably, or maybe before.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And then Christianity came later when I was 13, because my mother was a converted evangelical. So she took us to her church when I turned 13. So I had a mix of both worlds.
Okay. So let's move on to, how did you effectively gain your own sovereignty in your own life and spirituality?
I don't know if I have ever gotten it effectively. But since I was a girl, I knew the concept. I knew the concept of self-sovereignty. So, and that was what helped me to leave the island to go to New York, and then to Los Angeles, and without fear of because without fear, because I was going to be unsupported. My family was not going to tolerate that move that I did. So, and also because because I had that spiritual background that was different from the Catholic or the Christian in general, I was able to validate my destiny and my identity, which I believe that is one of the most important things that I learned from the spirituality of my father. To be able to validate your identity and your authentic self and your destiny, and to protect it from the influence of 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 costume, traditions, culture, patriarchy in my case. I don't know if I could have gotten the same results by also following the traditions. I don't know. I just decided to detach from that. And what I did was that I created my own, in my mind, when I was young, I created my alternative reality and alternative system away from the patriarchy system. It was like another jurisdiction. And I believe that very strongly, that I had my own set of rules separated from that, this other script. And that was what kept me going. Always validating and taking it seriously.
Okay. So the next question is, how were you able to calibrate left brain / right brain, say visionary versus practicality in your life and in your mind?
Well, it is an ongoing process. I don't think that for Aquarius people, that's an easy thing to do. We live mostly in our inner world, in our minds, and that's my favorite place to be, my own mind. So connecting with the world and being the practicality part is difficult. Uh, and in my case, well, it was finally when I had my son at 35 years old. I had my son, and I had no other choice than to be very, very down to earth. So that helped a lot. And what I did was that I imitated many things that I learned from my father. That waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning and start meditating and getting ready for another day, and uh, also I journaling. I still do journaling. So just to be grounded, and also I did exercises. So I think working with the body and working with meditation and writing with my handwriting in a journal helped me a lot. Uh, plus, plus, because when I left home, I was always living by myself. With I was also I had before I had my son, I had a lot of experience in terms of managing my finances, so that also helped a lot. That I had that previous experience of being independent.
Okay. Okay. So do you have, and did you experience as a child, a powerful ability to visualize concepts and ideas that came to you as classic Aquarian flashes of insight? And was it strong enough that it took over your awareness to the point where the physical world was almost not present in your consciousness?
Definitely, yes. Definitely, in many ways, not only in the arts, like seeing from the beginning, like a complete work of art in the mind, and suddenly uh, throwing it to the outer world, to an audience. But I also felt the same in in many moments of my life that I had to make decisions to definite decisions to take this route or another route. I felt this these flashes of the insight, as you say. Um, Also through dreams and visions. Sometimes visions. I saw things very clearly, even years before they happened. Uh, the way my art career began was it was very otherworldly. All the pieces came together and click, 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 and suddenly I was uh, not only presenting my work to an audience, I was able to travel and to do tours, and everything just clicked in a very harmonious way. I didn't have to do a lot of effort. It was already there. That script was already written, and it was already destined and just happened. So I have lived many, many experiences. Also, when I had my son, I had an experience where every single thing that my son needed also materialized. Uh, the right place, the right house. My first house was a house in the country. It was like a little farm when I had my son. That I got that farm so quickly that I couldn't believe it, and it was in within my means with the salary of a teacher, and I couldn't believe how easy things came through. So yes, definitely I have experienced this type of moments where everything is like very calibrated in the right way.
Okay. Were you ever called autistic, ADHD, or on the spectrum by the people around you?
Um, well, when I was in that moment that I had to do the transition to leave the island, I was called something. I don't know what, but um, because I was so sure that I was doing this, that this decision was the right decision, that I didn't mind that my family was trying to um, or were speculating that I had something, that I was not completely connected with the planet Earth. But since I was a girl, I always had moments in which I felt that I was not living in that I didn't belong to this world. And the way people reacted, not only my family, but in school and other places, the way that people reacted to me was like, it made me feel that I was different. But at that time, being autistic, the concept of being in the spectrum didn't exist. Autistic people were only the nonverbal people. And there were mostly boys, no, not girls. So I was never diagnosed because there was no diagnosis. My father took me to a psychologist to see if he could get a diagnosis, but there wasn't any. When I raised my son, because my son was diagnosed when he was a boy, and as I was reading more about it, I said to myself, "Wow, maybe this everything that I read is very similar to what I experienced as a girl. So there is a possibility that I may be autistic, at least like the Asperger type of autism. So I have I have that uh, suspicion that I may have been. I'm probably would be diagnosed as Asperger if girls were diagnosed in our times.
Understood. Understood. So, when did you first become aware of astrology, and when did you learn about being born under the 1962 Aquarian stellium? When did you become aware of and start relating to others born under the same stellium?
Well, astrology, I always were in situation and in conversations where astrology was always mentioned. And there were people in my family that were very aware of of, of astrology in general. But it was when I was in college, I believe, that there was a classmate that was studying astrology and she did my chart, and that's how I realized that I was a stellium, that I had a stellium in my chart. And she told me that at that time, I'm talking about the late 70s, early 80s, the people in the our stellium were called the Cameroon children. I don't know why. Probably because of Kennedy, maybe. I don't know. Because I really don't know why they were. She told me that some astrologers at that time they called our stellium,
Hmm.
our people, the Cameroon children. So that's what she told me.
Cameroon?
Cameroon children.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one myself.
Mhm.
Interesting. That's going to be a research topic for me later.
Yes, I don't know. Maybe we can research about that because I think that she told me that it was because it was the year that Kennedy was in power. We have to find out why.
Yeah, we'll look at that later.
Hmm.
That's a side topic.
Hmm.
Mm. Okay, what childhood traumas did you experience, and are there after effects from it? Were they related to your Aquarianness?
Well, I think that the feeling that I didn't belong to this world. This is something that I felt since I was a little girl. The feeling that I was not understood even by my own family, that I wasn't supported when I decided to follow my God and to follow my vision of my career and to go to that route, which is very interesting because it was the spirituality of my father that supported me in that decision internally. But then when my father saw the decision that I made, it was difficult for him to accept it because probably because I was a girl. Not, probably he felt that following your own path was something for boys, not for the girls. So it was very hard for him to accept it, and he didn't want to talk to me for a very long time. He felt um, that well, I don't know how he felt, but it was very hard for him to accept it. Eventually, he did, and he understood, but it took a while.
It sounds like you had some healing in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Good. That's good. So I think we've kind of covered this already, but I'm going to ask anyway. So if you can go a little bit deeper into it, what career path and specialized fields of knowledge have you embraced, gained, and achieved professional success with in your life up until now? What did you do when you grew up?
yes, I think that that is covered already. Um, mhm. And the last one will be the visions.
Yeah. What visions of alternate realities or alternative realities or possible futures have you had? Technology, societal structures, economic structures, ways of making life better for humanity in general, and ways of connecting socially that go beyond the social media structures we have now, or ways of bettering the environment and sustainability of civilization. I know that's pretty wide ranging, but
Yes.
it also gives you a lot of latitude to answer.
Yes, I remember that as a child I had visions of things that I saw later when as an adult that didn't exist. Visions of, for example, the communication through Wi-Fi, the communication through all the computers, having computers. I remember that I had when I was a little girl in the elementary years. I had a dream that I was in a city that the city each building of the city was a huge computer and and it was a city in underground city with a lot of computers and it was like a different an alternate reality that were happening underground and also I had dreams of being taken in a flying car to another place. It was like very similar to Puerto Rico. It was a tropical place where a group of kids were waiting for me, and I had a great time playing with them in the forest. And but the forest had towers that were very similar to the towers that we see now in some Asian uh, cities that are very narrow with a like a ball and then narrow again these huge towers in the middle of the forest. So I remember that I had that vision also. uh, so many things that I envisioned when I as a child I have seen it as an adult. um, like things morphing into another thing, like how now we see in AI films in cinema, in the AI
Mhm.
cinema that you see things morphing into another. Now, when I see those films, I say, "Wow, I remember seeing that when I was a child." So,
Interesting.
mhm,
Very interesting. Okay, so that finishes out the series of questions that we initially had. I'm certain we'll end up doing another round of interviews later that will have a different set of questions involved.
mhm.
But at this point, I'd like to ask, if possible, could you share a copy, screen share a copy of your chart?
Well, let me see if I see it here.
Go ahead, take your time. And for anyone watching, if you want to take a little bit of an intermission break, this might be the best time.
Uh-huh.
So we'll leave it up on the screen for a little bit after Yvette finds it, assuming that's possible. And my bad for not thinking of this before we got started.
Uh-huh. Hmm. If I don't find it, I can make another one quickly in a
that,
site.
that might be the easiest answer, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more try in my. See.
And what you do, if you end up doing another site, you might want to print it to a PDF file.
Mm. Well, here I found something. It's my chart. It's not the best chart, but it's a chart.
It's good enough.
Mm.
Any real astrologers watching this later probably can work from that. While you're doing that, I'm going to get mine ready for later.
Okay. Okay. It's not perfect, but
It's all right.
let me share it. Okay.
All right. And the screen sharing control should be right at the bottom center. It looks like a little computer screen with an up arrow.
Okay. Hmm. Do you see?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do see the chart being shared. Okay. All right. And this has the birth date and time information and location. So astrologers can probably work with that to get a little bit better chart if they want to in a more preferred format. I can see we have Mars, the moon, Saturn, the sun, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter all in Aquarius. And then it looks like Chiron in Pisces, the Scorpio ascendant. And of course, like all of us, Pluto and Uranus, technically in opposition to the stellium, but quite a powerful stellium. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets in Aquarius. You actually have one more than I do because you're a little closer to the you're actually almost at stellium max where you're at right there, which is like when the closest alignment in Aquarius was during that stellium in 1962. Okay, and I think we'll leave that long enough. I'm going to close my copy of the questions, and then I'm going to let you take over as the interviewer, and I'm going to maximize my screen here, and you can end screen sharing when you're ready. And that note, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Okay, so let's start with your earliest memory.
My earliest memory is probably when I was about 1.5, and I don't think I was 2 yet, and I had followed my mom down in the basement, and she was ironing sheets. I think I want to say it was on the ironing board down in the basement, and she had a few different extension cords running the iron. And I don't think she realized I was down there, and I had crawled under the ironing board while she was ironing. And I was just kind of sitting under there, kind of listening and, watching mom move around the ironing board and stuff. And someone knocked on the door. And so she went upstairs while I was ironing. Or while she was ironing, and she went upstairs, and I was under the ironing board, and the extension cords were draped over the sides, and I understood enough that if you unplug the iron, it turned it off, right? But I didn't understand yet that it took a while to cool off. So I was unplugging the cords and putting up my hand up because I was afraid I'd get tangled and pull the iron down on myself trying to get out from under there. And putting my hand up near it, and I could see it's still hot, still hot. And I unplugged this cord, and that one didn't do it. And that one didn't do it. And then all of a sudden, I got my left pointer finger, stuck between the prongs on one of those extension cords. And I was hopping up and down, screaming underneath there. And my mom's friend who had come over to visit came downstairs and kicked it. Mom was going to come down and grab me. She was first down the stairs, but he knocked her aside and kicked the cord off my finger. And then they pulled me out from under there and took me upstairs. And I still have a scar to this day where the thing was on that finger. I got it pretty good. But I had the Ben Franklin experience as my first memory.
Wow.
So I've always had an interesting relationship with electricity as long as I can remember, literally. So that's my earliest childhood memory. And surprise, surprise, Aquarians and electricity.
That's true. Do you had a problem with like electrocuted when you were a kid many times? Were you
not many times, no, not after that one.
You learned your lesson.
I learned I learned electricity is something you extremely respect.
Exactly.
There's a couple of times later in life I'm surprised I didn't get electrocuted, but yeah, not as a child. No.
Mhm. Okay. And what is your earliest memory of sense of nation?
I'm going to have to go with when we first said the Pledge of Allegiance in grade school.
Mm,
I want to say, I don't think it was kindergarten. I can't remember if it was kindergarten or if it was first grade. But I think when we started doing the Pledge of Allegiance in school, I think that's
mhm,
when I started thinking about what country it was. And that I was part of this country or nation,
mhm,
and that there were other nations out there. I think that came more through school and education in public school.
mm. Okay. And what is your earliest memory of sense of mission and purpose?
Ever since I was a little kid, I thought I was going to be a pilot to fly airplanes.
Mm,
Um, Unfortunately, at when I was 10 years old, I got glasses, and my parents and a few other people, and they, like they always do with little boys, they asked, "What do you want to do when you grow
mhm,
up?" And I said, "I want to be a pilot." And they were like, "Oh, you'll never fly anything but cargo. You have to get it, glasses. They won't let you fly fighter jets or any of the cool fast airplanes."
mhm,
And that kind of tamped that dream down. So after that, I became fairly rudderless as a sense of mission for quite a long time.
mhm. Hmm. Okay. What was the environment of a support network in your family, your school, government?
I want to say it was almost non-existent,
Mhm,
um, in the sense of supporting my sense of self, or any visions I had of how things should be or what I might want to do. It was always looked at as if I were some kind of dreamer, and head in the clouds, never based in reality. Um, People didn't see me as serious. I still think that's often the case, that I'm not taken seriously.
mm,
I don't know if that's because I sometimes speak of things that I have, and I think I learned through that to kind of keep it to myself for the most part, at least when I was younger. Uh,
mhm,
you know, I think, to me, the best way I can describe it is I call it the Just Joe syndrome, as in people that are too close to you, they get used to you, expressing these alternate ideas and all that kind of stuff, and saying what you think before you can filter your mouth,
mm,
so to speak. And they're like, and they know the quintessential Joe, and they're so used to him, they go, "Oh, that's just Joe. That's just Joe," and brush it off. And
mhm.
I think that was kind of my experience with all this in my younger life.
So you developed like coping mechanism to deal with it, like.
Um, I turned to the inner world. I had a very strong vocabulary at a very, very young age, but I
Mhm,
stopped really talking as much. Um, I would write, I would draw, I would read, but I turned to the inner world because there was nothing for me in the outer world. nothing nurturing along these lines.
Yes, that's a very Aquarius experience, I believe. Yeah.
I think so.
Mhm. What was your career life like from the beginning until now?
Well, my first job was when I was 11 years old, and I had a paper route delivering newspapers and collections. I was pretty good at the delivering part, not so good at the collecting the money part. Um, and then as a teenager, I got a job um, at my first of three high schools, going, and occasionally it was part-time. We would go after school and we worked in a pizza crust factory, me and two other friends that I knew from high school, and we worked in a pizza crust factory. And then um, after that, we moved to Texas, and I got an after school and weekend job with a tree and lawn service, and I got along very well there. I liked the work. It was outdoors, it was physical, good exercise. I was pretty good at it. My boss liked me and things, and that was pretty good, but it wasn't technical or any of that, but it satisfied the physical side. And I think having an Aries moon, I have a strong undercurrent of that physical that that needs to be addressed. And if I neglect it, I kind of regret it. Um, After that, I went into the Air Force at 17 years old, 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. It was either that or run away to California and start a rock band. And I didn't play an instrument, according to my mom. Uh, and So I was talked into going into the Air Force, and based on my Armed Services vocational aptitude battery scores, they let me in without a high school diploma on the condition that I get a GED by the same time I would have graduated with high school, which I did while I
Mhm.
was in, and I started working on radar, specialized radar,
Mhm.
when I was 17, 18 years old. And then after I got out of the Air Force, um, we were in the tail end of a recession, and I was back in a small town in Wisconsin. And there was like no job unless somebody died or got themselves fired. You just couldn't find a job anywhere. And I went through a lot of different situations. Young men out of work, it's not very easy, especially once you're over 18 years old. It's not an easy thing to be out of work at that age. A lot of couch surfing, a lot of wondering where I was going to get my next meal, those kind of things at that young age. And then I ended up hitchhiking um, down to Mississippi. A female friend of mine, friend, I had family down there, and she said there might be work there. And so I tried that. It didn't really turn out. I went through a residential electrical course, and it was actually going to be industrial maintenance, but I lost my place to stay there when I got through the first section before I got into industrial electrical. And then I hitchhiked. I had hitchhiked down there for that, which is an interesting story in and of itself, but it'd be too
Mhm.
long. And then I hitchhiked to Dallas, Texas, and stayed with my sister's ex-husband and his new wife, which was interesting. But I got a job working as a parts runner in an Amco transmission shop. And I proceeded to go through probably about 20 different jobs over the next 10 years, just trying to figure out, because nothing really fit, nothing really paid enough. Um, Things weren't mechanical enough, or it was always I didn't really exercise my intellect, and I would get bored very quickly, and especially with the pay considerations. And then I got another chance to go to college. I was in college, but I had money issues and couldn't finish, and student loans got called on me. And this is part of the reason for all the bumbling around for those 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I got another chance to go to college on a program for dislocated workers. I was just freshly laid off from a factory that had gotten closed due to foreign competition. This was 1989, 1990, right around there. And I went back to school for civilian aircraft electronics, and I took it extremely seriously, and I pulled straight A's all the way through. I got a 2-year vocational diploma in aircraft electronics. That I was in the last class to make it through before the program was canceled altogether by the federal government. It was a federal program. And I graduated with a 3.9 GPA. And at the same month I graduated, Free Airlines went bankrupt and flooded the market with experienced aircraft electronics technicians and people that had the electronics and the mechanical side both, because there was 2 tracks, electrical and mechanical,
Mm-hmm.
in aircraft at the time. And so I started mailing out resumes all over the state to any company that had anything to do with electronics. And I got hired by a long distance phone company to install equipment on telephone lines that would automatically dial an alternative long distance carrier.
Wow.
And I've spent most of the time since then in long distance telecommunications on the technical side, doing one aspect or the other of the technical work. And I've taught myself information technology. And I did a brief stint for about 4 years as an information technology instructor at a small private college. And I also ran for about 3 years my own small computer repair business. And then I wound up back in telecommunications again, basically for the same company I was working for back then. There was a move from the Chicago area to California involved, and it was because of grandkids. But I've always gravitated toward technology, and
Mm-hmm.
technology related to aviation earlier, wanting to be a pilot or be close to aircraft. Um, yeah, and I want to stress that this is long-term a career in communications, a technological career in communications, because in my chart I have Virgo rising, and the ruler of my chart is Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
So just saying,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
complicated.
Yes, but somehow you managed to land where you were supposed to. But I think that it was like a combination of exposures of different knowledges that had to amount to get to what your specialization was, because it's not a simple specialization. It requires a lot of
Yeah. A lot of specialized knowledge in very
exactly
different areas, and a lot of
in
rapid
different
change. The technology is constantly changing.
exactly, and that's a very Aquarius career path because
Very
it has
classic
the
Aquarius, especially in a
electronics, the
yeah,
communication, uh,
yeah.
technology. Yes,
Well, the ruler of my
technology.
chart's the mythical god of communications.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So surprise, surprise.
exactly. That's very interesting. How did the Cold War impact your perceptions of the world around you?
I want to say when I was younger, as a teenager, and as a young school child, I didn't really have the filters to not go along with the societal narrative of the Cold War. I mean, I believed what my teachers told me. I believed what the adults around me were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got to be a young adult in the military, and I learned more about, things like Vietnam and stuff like that since, I always thought this was not the greatest idea. I always felt like, and this is probably classical for everyone my generation and the generations preceding mine, and possibly even the generation right after us. I always felt like there was a shadow over our head that we could go to bed one night and the next morning there would be nothing but ashes left. And I always felt that was wrong. And it kind of played into my first presidential election. Uh, the first election that I was old enough to vote in was in 1980. I was in the military, and I felt this whole thing about, everybody being able to destroy the whole world and nuke each other was wrong. And there was a candidate that was talking about being able to shoot nuclear missiles down.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I probably don't need to name names.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, hey, something that stops nuclear missiles is probably better than some more nuclear missiles. So in my mind, I voted for that. Fool me once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's kind of where my conscience was I thought this whole Cold War thing was wrong. And I felt it was very, very hopeful in the 90s when, according to everyone, the Cold War was over and the Berlin Wall came down. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, isn't the world getting to be a better place? We don't have to deal with this huge national, international rivalry anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened
Yes.
so sudden, right? That
Yeah.
was, mm,
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a great thing at the time. I mean,
mm,
I think everybody was hopeful and joyful at the time.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember.
We- Yeah. We didn't see behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. It was a little bit Oz,
Uh-huh.
not the doctor, the land of.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, those were a time that with a lot of uncertainty, definitely.
Mhm.
And what about the HIV/AIDS? What impact had on your perception of the world?
It was complex. Uh, there was the side of it that, I grew up in the era of post 1969, with the hippies and my generation, we kind of admired the hippies. We loved like the 60s music, rock and roll and all that. And yeah, everybody around us was sex, drugs, rock and roll. That was the mantra back then.
Mm,
And, peace, love, everybody's going to be cool with each other, brotherly love. We're all going to be a big, happy family of rainbows, flowers, and flower power. Remember flower power and all that kind of stuff and
mm,
all the wonderful artwork and all that. And we had this concept of free love. And like people could be sexually open and expressive,
mm.
love one another, and it felt like there weren't any consequences. And then, wham! Here it comes HIV/AIDS and shut that all down overnight.
Exactly.
That was like, it was like, yeah, next thing, if you got with the wrong person, you were a dead person.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, somebody pounded nails in the coffin. of that entire era of life. So there was that aspect of it. And then there was the horrible, horrible treatment of the people that had HIV/AIDS. And everyone was afraid to be near them. I mean, you were physically afraid for your life because at that time people didn't know if it could be transmitted through, minor physical contact at first. It's almost like when it first happened, it reminds me of the reaction to the coronavirus in
Exactly.
2020.
True. Very
People were,
similar. Mm-hmm.
yeah, people were that afraid of HIV/AIDS
Mm-hmm.
in that era, in that early era when it first became known. They didn't know if it was potentially airborne or it could be transmitted through people's sweat.
Mm-hmm.
They just knew like it was most likely transmitted through bodily fluids, but they didn't know about sweat, spit, what bodily fluids, any and all. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
even the steam from your breath, we didn't know early on. So there was a huge fear of HIV/AIDS
Mm-hmm.
early on, and then later on, there was the stigmatism of gays and all that happened because it was portrayed as like a gay person's disease when it wasn't. It was impacting heterosexual couples as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was a difficult time. It was difficult in terms of the dehumanizing aspect of someone who of a diagnosis would have on someone's life, and the fear of being around people that had it. And it was difficult to navigate in a lot of ways, and
Mm-hmm.
it almost felt like a penalty for those early years of freedom in a way.
Who knows? There are so many mysteries in
Hmm.
this world.
Hmm.
Yes, that's definitely. And also the fact that our generation we were in our 20s.
Hmm.
It was the
Early 20s.
early 20s. So it was a eh, very difficult for young people. Very
Mhm.
difficult time.
Very much so.
Hmm. A lot of stress. Did you experience a dichotomy of choice between well, it says here an artistic life path, or in your case, the mechanical engineer or traditional career path?
Yeah, very much so. I always had both sides to me. I was a very good artist. I was good at drawing. I was
Okay.
starting to become somewhat of a creative writer. I learned to draw from comic books like Marvel superheroes and stuff like that. But even younger, I was drawing like cars and airplanes and submarines and and people and animals and all kinds of things. I love to draw, and I still do. Um, but I was always taught you'll never make any money at that. I even went to some interesting art classes a few times when I was in high school, and also junior high school. There was a college art class where we got taught to make like little characters and little scenes and set and put on little plays and stuff like that. We were being taught by art students at college in Beloit College in Wisconsin um, at that time. And there were artistic projects when I was young. So I always had a lot of encouragement to do art as a fun leisure activity, but I never had encouragement to do art as a living.
True.
Go back to when I joined the Air Force. I was talked into joining the Air Force versus starting a rock band. How many Aquarians in 1962 have become like stellar musicians? I don't know that I have the talent level of like a Garth Brooks or Sheryl Crow or or was it Clint Black was another country one. And
Mhm.
there's another Axl Rose, several of our stellium. I have gone to become A-list artists. I don't know that I would have ever gotten there, but it would have been interesting to try for sure.
Mhm.
And but instead, I went along with the advice to go into things that were more mechanical, electrical, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and wound up being where I landed long term. Watch out when I retire. Just saying, I haven't given up.
Mhm.
I still have a very much left brain, right brain, kind of like some, the wee hours of the morning are very right brain. And part of it, an outlet for that, for me, that artistic side is I started really writing poetry online in around circa 2000. And I've done a lot of online poetry as an outlet for that. A little bit of drawing and stuff like that too. Not so
Mhm.
much. That's more time consuming, but the writing definitely um, has been there. And there's a few different creative writing projects of a longer nature that I'd like to do in retirement as well. To take those and actually turn it into full-fledged finished works.
Mhm.
Um, but like they say, you got to make a living. Just like you always had to have a day job.
The
Um, yeah,
deja. Always, yes.
yeah, same here.
It would be nice to. It would be nice if we could also interview these musicians that were able to make a living in music only to see what type of support they got, so they could make it happen. It will
How
be.
did they land on their piano keys and guitar strings? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
how they could manage to make that as a way of living and manage it as a business.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree. I'd love to be able to do that. Yeah.
Mhm. When did you first become aware of esoteric and alternative spiritual paths?
Okay. I think this was more of a gradual process for me. I mean, starting in the second half of fifth grade, I went to many different schools when I was growing up. We moved around a lot. I was almost like a military brat before I was a military brat. Um, but one of the schools I went to from the second half of fifth grade through eighth grade was a Catholic school in Beloit, Wisconsin. And they had some teachings of astrologers, but astrologers were painted in a very negative light. And they did mention other forms, but in the library, in the school library, my place of refuge in school was books, right? And in the school library, they had books on Norse mythology and Greek mythology. And I read those through and through, cover to cover, cleaned them out. And starting with Norse mythology, I don't know why that came first, but it did. And then the Greek mythology afterwards. And then as a freshman in high school, I had started buying, excuse me, I had started buying paperback novels when I was in junior high and grade school, mostly science fiction.
Mhm.
But after a while, I got to be so voracious of a reader, I was pretty fast, that I would read anything I could get my hands on. And then I got my hands on, in high school in Madison, Wisconsin, a copy of Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. And that's when I first learned about astrology. And, that there was something a little bit more to it than what they had in the newspaper column. And then I also read books on things like ESP and astral projection and quite a few other interesting different alternative topics, alternative spirituality. I started becoming aware of things like like Buddhism, and I saw ads for the Rosicrucians. I never actually followed up on one because I was underage, couldn't really go off and join a Rosicrucian commune at 15 years old, or whatever they did. I don't know. I still to this day don't know that much about it, but I was aware of it. But I was interested in a lot of that stuff. I found it kind of resonated, a lot of it in a way. That's also about the same time I became aware of things like Eric von Daniken and Chariot of Gods. A lot of heavy reading in that area, and also hard science fiction. That was my first love with reading.
Interesting. Very interesting route from science fiction to spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense.
Well, modern day spirituality for me is more of an intermingling of quantum physics and shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole different topic
Mm-hmm.
that you won't find in a book, but might be worth having a discussion about another time and another topic other than a life review. Yeah.
Yes, I understand when you say that you resonated better with this type of spirituality. It happened the same with me in my childhood, as I told you, that I felt more connected with that type of spirituality.
Yeah.
How do you effectively gain your own sovereignty in your own life and spirituality?
Well, that's an open question whether I actually ever did.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as far as the choices and options that are open to your average citizen of working class,
Mm-hmm.
I gained that just simply by becoming 18 in the context of what's available to your average working age person in society.
Mm-hmm.
Could I pick what job to go into or what to do? Yeah. But you also have to go what people will pay you for. And spirituality, yeah, I could have my own choices in spirituality, and like a lot of things in my inner world, I didn't talk about them, right? I was pretty much my own version, kept to myself.
Yes.
Except for a few certain people that would, be open to what I was talking about, but not many. So sovereignty in that sense, I don't know that any of us in modern society, in human tribal society, which all human societies are in one way, shape, or form tribal. I don't know that any of us have complete sovereignty in that regard, in either of those regards. But in general, by becoming 18, I was able to choose among the options on the menu and then just ignore one of the menus.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And with a lot of certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I believe is also a characteristic of Aquarius people, that we do these things with a lot of inner certainty. We, even though without worrying that it is accepted or not. That's how I interpret.
It's more worrying about whether it's sustaining or not, whether it's not so much about whether it's acceptable or not, but whether it will sustain you in life. And the acceptability if somebody had really wanted to have a deep conversation, I would have been honest about what I thought about things and how I felt about things and what my beliefs were. Definitely certainty, yes, inner certainty to an extent. I like to say that most Aquarians, myself included, are we're a fixed sign, right? And so we're very determined in our beliefs and our opinions once we form them. And the other thing about that, about being Aquarius, is we're all about new ideas and new innovations. It's kind of a little bit of a conundrum with being a fixed sign. So here's where I think the intersection of that falls with Aquarius, being a fixed sign and being so into new ideas. We're pretty damn sure of ourselves unless we got some really good evidence to the contrary. Give me solid evidence and I'll change my mind, but it's not going to be just on somebody else's say so.
Exactly. Do you have and do you experience as a child a powerful ability to visualize concepts and ideas that came to you as classic Aquarian flashes of insight? Was it strong enough that it took over your awareness to the point where the physical world was almost not present in your consciousness?
Extremely so.
Mhm.
Very extremely so.
Mhm.
In grade school, this manifested as me being, when I'm reading a book, really reading a book, it's almost like watching a movie in my head for me. And in grade school, junior high school, etc., even prior to that, fourth grade, I think it really started. I would get into the book so much that I would lose all awareness of what was going on around me completely. And I started at that age, since I wanted to read anything and everything I could get my hands on. The first thing I did when we got our new textbooks for the beginning of the year was read those textbooks cover to cover in the first month that we were in school for that year.
Mm.
And then I would have to wait a whole another year to get new textbooks. And it was extremely frustrating. And the teachers didn't understand what to do with me, because at that point, I would be reading paperbacks behind my desk, not listening to what was going on in class because I'd already read it all. Getting high 90s and hundreds on test scores, everything but math. Math is different. You can't do this kind of thing with math. Sorry, it just doesn't work that way. But and they thought I was cheating. They would test me over and over and over again. They're like, I don't know how he knows this, but he knows it. Like, I would have told them if they'd asked me. I read the book. Yeah, and I went through school like that. I had more science fiction novels confiscated, and I would go down to the drugstore or local bookstore and grab another copy the next day. Yeah, ride my bicycle over and get another copy of the same book and finish reading it anyway. And that was pretty much school for me. High school was like that, but I also had visions of things that could be very, very detailed visions of things that could be. Um, and I would try to describe them to people, and that's when the Just Joe syndrome would really hit hard because they couldn't see what I was seeing. And usually 50 years later would come out. Like in 1981, 82, I was trying to tell my friends about ion propulsion systems. And Now everybody's heard of ion propulsion systems if you follow space exploration at all, because they're all over the place. They're not the ones I was envisioning, and they're not nearly as strong as what I was, picturing back then. But they exist, and they're pretty common now. And I've shared articles with a couple of friends of mine and said, this is what I was talking about back in 1981, 1982, and we're talking this is 2010 to 2014. What's that classic saying? Aquarians are 50 years ahead of their time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was like that. And then I think the internet might have eroded and chipped away at that to some extent. I
Mm-hmm.
think the internet is really bad for people's focus and concentration and long duration concentration and focus. I think it's like poison for that part of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And the short answer is yes.
Yeah. Were you ever called autistic, ADHD, or on the spectrum by the people around you or close to you?
Like you, as a young person, those acronyms didn't exist. They didn't really come into play until my son was in school.
Mhm.
Um, that was called a daydreamer in
Oh,
school. That was thrown at anybody that didn't go along with the follow along at the same pace as all the other students in class. That wasn't on the topic they were on. Um, my wife calls me that very often. She says,
mhm.
you're on the spectrum somewhere. Yeah, I think you're from another planet. I hear that in my marriage all the time. We've been married 25 years, so she's used to living with an alien. Uh, yeah, but um, my son was diagnosed ADHD uh,
Mm,
while he was in grade school, and of course they did what they did in the 90s with those kids, with the drugs. I didn't have any say so, and I was vehemently against it, because I think actually those that can be, in a way, if it's nurtured and if it's encouraged to be a useful tool. I think it's like kind of a superpower, that ability to visualize at that level.
mhm,
Um, but it needs to be channeled rather than drugged.
mhm.
Um, and that's my strong belief on the whole ADHD autism thing. It needs to be trained, focused, and channeled rather than drugged out of someone, because you're not going to drug it out of them. You're just going to deaden their mind.
Agree. Mhm. So somehow we were lucky because we didn't get any
We were
treatment.
pre-drugs, that kind.
When did you first become aware of astrology? When did you learn about being born under the 1962 Aquarian stellium? And when did you become aware of and start relating to others born under the same stellium?
Okay. So first becoming aware of a deeper meaning of a deeper level of astrology would have been as a teenager, reading those books, Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. Little follow up, I read more astrology books in my early 30s, um, while I was in telecommunications and before I got married. I read, books on moon signs. I, I probably am two-thirds of where I would need to be able to do astrology. There's few gaps. I know what they are. Another retirement project, but as far as being aware of being born under the stellium, not until I was dating my wife. So, interesting note, and another extremely Aquarian story, super Aquarian story. I married a long-term psychic astrologer. My wife was actually pretty famous in the astrology community for a long time. Now she's been retired for a good 10 plus years, so probably not so much anymore. But back in that era, she was very well known for this in astrological circles. And she ran my chart and was like, "Oh my God, I'm playing with fire." And that's when I found out about the stellium, when I'd actually seen my own chart done. So I'm gonna put that at around 38 years old, where I found out about the stellium. And then I didn't really find out about other people in the stellium. I knew of one, but she had dropped out of my life. We were born within hours of each other in the same town. But she went kind of crazy, and everybody said crazy, but super Aquarians. But Facebook, the Facebook group Aquarians of 1962, probably I was an early adopter with Facebook and Twitter, and yeah, probably not too awful long after I got on Facebook. So mid 2000s, like 2005, 2008, somewhere in there, maybe. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, this is why.
Wow. So we have been in that Facebook groups for more than 10 years already, right?
I would say, yeah.
Wow.
I would say if I found it in 2008 to 2010, somewhere in that neighborhood, so we're already talking over 15 years, 15 to 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'd have to ask Christine, when did I join that group? Yeah, because that's when I really started talking to the rest of the Aqua Stells. Yeah, I'm 62 now. There's been a few more Aquarian stelliums, not quite as many planets as the one in 62, but there's been a few more, and there's going to be another one in about 75, 76 years. Yeah, so there's a few waves of us coming in from whatever other karmic lands we originated from.
What childhood traumas did you experience, and are there effects from what are the effects from it? Were they related to your Aquarianness?
All right, so there have been a few. The childhood trauma of getting zapped by electricity, I think that's probably a very Aquarian thing. The biggest childhood trauma I can remember is when I was in second grade. I don't talk about this often, but there was another one similar incident when I was actually in preschool, like Head Start. I was kind of like kidnapped at knife point by a group of about 5 African American girls, and forced to expose myself under the threat of being cut up. That was, and the oldest one was like 3 times my size, was like 14, 15, and that was pretty shocking. And then in second grade, there was a girl in school that I thought was my friend, and she came to school one morning with tap dancing shoes on and proceeded to tell me, like what she was going to do if anybody messed with her and stuff like that. And then I kind of forgot all about it, like, oh, she's my friend and everything. And then at recess, she picked a fight with me and did what she said she was going to do.
Wow.
And, and, that was physically injured, by that, not permanently, but
Mhm.
definitely psychologically
So you
permanent.
were stabbed by with the shoes?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was pretty bad, and, and then there's the embarrassment. My mom went raging in front of the principal and made me show her what had happened.
Mhm.
And, as a female principal, and this is like, at that point, um, a heterosexual male, but having a big difficulties trusting women for the rest of my life
Hmm.
after that. But I also came to the conclusion at that point that I never wanted to be, like the one to victimize somebody like that.
Mhm.
I never wanted to be that kind of a jerk, and
Mhm.
or to hurt other people physically on that level. It became a very hard conviction in my life. There's times when I backed down from fights that I knew that I could win easily
Mhm.
because I didn't want to hurt someone else, even though they were the jerk that was antagonizing me. And I pretty much have tried to live a very peaceful life ever since then. Um, so silver lining that came out of it, that led me to that conviction in life. And so I tend to gravitate towards situations of low drama. One of my life mottos is life is better on a low drama diet, because I don't want that Aries moon to kick in and get into those fight or flight type situations. Because when I do blow up, and there's been a few times, there's an awful lot of dynamite under that
Mhm.
at the end of that long, long, long fuse. Yeah, but so childhood trauma, that's definitely the biggest one right there. And I don't know, maybe it made me a better person in the long run. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
always anything in life. There's always positives and minuses to it. It's pretty traumatic for a second grader, but it made me a more careful, compassionate, and considerate human being through life too. So um, yeah, at this age, I look at it very differently than I did when I was that age. Let's put it that way. I
Mhm.
also recognize why some of my life has gone the way it has. As a young man, I was very, very shy around women for good reason, and for a long, long time. Yeah. Now I understand what's going on. Yeah. And so I can kind of moderate that reaction and cope with it. Once the initial that moment is over.
That's very interesting because I remember that in one conversation that we had with the group, with the Facebook group, in a Zoom meeting, I remember that many members of this Aquarian stellium group said that that age in like the second grade age, like it was like around 7 years old. We were our many of us had a traumatic experience, and that would be very interesting to know what was going on in astrology at that time, because now that you say that, I remember that I also had a very traumatic, I would just remember a very traumatic experience in the second grade also. Uh, so it will be interesting to know what happened in terms of what was going on at that time in astrology.
Something something personality forming for all of us, I would think.
And what you said is so, I can relate so much because I also remember that I was very quiet. Uh, and also, I see a similarity in terms of of the low drama, choosing to be quiet and to avoid drama on purposely. That I feel very, very related to. That would be very interesting to study. So, what career path and specialized fields of knowledge have you embraced, gained, and achieved professional success with in your life up to until now? And what did you do when you grew up?
Uh, well, I think I've kind of already answered that to
Yes.
some extent. Definitely electronics, electricity. Um, I've had basic training in simple electrical. I've had training in aircraft electronics. I've had training in computers and information technology and telecommunications. So I would think most of the technical even radar, radio. I mean, you have to understand radio to be able to work on radar. So the basics and fundamentals of radio and radio electromagnetic radiation. Um, so electronics, optical technologies, um, communications technologies, the web technologies. I'm very, very good at that. I've always been an early adopter of web technologies, and I follow, like for instance, when I buy a smartphone, etc. I'm always checking out the technical specifications before.
Mhm.
I'm tech support for a lot of friends and family. I think I've been tech support for the Aquarians of 62 a few times here and there. Is this kind of, yeah, so technical, very technical.
Mhm.
Yeah. I almost branched off into graphic arts one time, commercial graphic arts one time, but I didn't follow that path.
Mhm. Mhm. So the technical mind is very abstract mind. It's an abstract mind, as poetry is an abstract mind. So there is a similarity.
Both of them, both of them play off that strong ability to visualize.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking pictures and turning them into words when
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing poetry. I'm visualizing what's going on with the electronics and all that stuff when I'm troubleshooting. That visualizing skill, as I've mentioned before, needs to be channeled. And
Uh-huh.
I've gotten to be able to do that fairly effectively. I wouldn't say perfect. Nobody's perfect. No human being is perfect, but I'm fairly good at it.
Mm-hmm. And the last question is, what visions of alternative realities of possible futures have you had in technologies, in society, sorry, so societal structures, economic structures, ways of making life better for humanity in general, ways of connecting socially that go beyond the social media structures, um, ways of bettering the environment and sustainability of civilization.
Okay, so this is going to be a long answer,
Mhm.
probably, but starting, yeah, I was visualizing alternative aircraft when I was a kid in grade school. I would have visions of like a different world that we lived in. Visualizations of underground cities, a little bit along the lines of what you're talking about.
Well,
Um, Definitely visualizing ion propulsion in the 1980s, and that vision hasn't quite come to pass the way I thought about it. I'd love to talk to a good, electromechanical engineer about
mhm.
how how to pull off what I'm thinking of. Um, Different form of wind turbine. I've been interested in wind energy since probably circa 1999 to 2000. around there, and I followed it quite extensively. As a hobby, I understand it pretty well. I've read books on it. Um, all that underground housing, alternative housing methods, those things. As far as societal structures, we have a lot of isms. I like to call them a lot of isms. We have capitalism, we have socialism, we
Mhm.
have democratic socialism,
Mhm.
we have communism, we have this ism, fascism.
Mhm.
We have all these isms. Back around 2010-ish, 2008, 2009, 2010, right around there, I kind of thought we were going to have a different ism. And
Mhm.
this is going to be a very hyper Aquarian sounding, but I call it techism. That's what I called it back then. I even started to blog about it a little bit, but I kind of gave up because I couldn't get people to see what I was envisioning.
Mhm.
But picture a world where instead of money exchanging hands, we have the technology now where we can take into account where the greatest need for resources is of a specific type of resource, what the environmental considerations are of doing something that we're thinking about doing, where the greatest humanitarian needs are, and we can use technology to allocate those resources fairly. And instead of basing people's worth on how much money they have and how much they can control, which has nothing to do with how much they can actually personally use, and basing people's worth on how they contribute ideas to society, and using technology to allocate resources based on need, environmental science, and technological need and human need, and balance those things in such a way that we do the most for the greatest number of people as possible,
Mhm.
without, in a way that's sustainable, that's not going to wreck the earth, and adding in biodiversity and taking society underground so that we can restore the biodiversity of the surface, and giving people the right to go up to the surface and visit it regularly, routinely. People need sunlight. They
Mhm.
need natural air. They need forest time.
Mhm.
They need time out in nature. This is why natural parks, or like national parks and those type of things exist. This is why there's things like forest bathing. We need to take all of this and bring it to a whole nother level, and we need to gear human society to be complementary to nature around us, and better for all of us, as many of us as possible. And for those that are least in society, we need to take care of them. For instance, the homeless. I have visions of, how in Japan they have those honeycomb cells,
Mhm.
right? Where the business travelers go and stay for a few days.
Mhm.
Well, what if we had a couple of honeycomb cells for everybody that was unhoused, and they had a place to eat, sleep, and all that kind of, like, a cafeteria or something like
Mhm.
that, and they had one to live in and one to store their stuff in, and that
Mhm.
would give them a mailing address and internet access and a computer, a basic computer, so they could access the web, because so much is done on the web now. You don't need much of a computer to use the web and all that stuff anyway.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest things that people that are on house phase is dealing with, not having a physical address where you can get mail sent to, or a claim residence at.
Mhm.
There's those type of things. Um, the ability for people to move between those, or live in those without stigma,
Mhm.
right? because we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be having a rough time if AI replaces all the kind of jobs that they're talking about. We're going to need to move to a system like this that you don't have to have money to exchange to be worth something. You just have to be a human being to be worth something. And then maybe you're worth a little more if you're contributing good ideas and stuff like that, as far as your social status. But your basic needs being met, everyone should have that. Okay, so like, I don't know how it will go as far as, I'm not saying everybody should live there, but that should be like the base level that everybody has
Exactly.
access to, so they at least have somewhere to live, to go, and a way to interact with society in general, a way to socialize, and because humans were social creatures, being isolated on the streets, no wonder people have mental health issues. Being afraid of being grabbed off the street and thrown in jail just for being broke, those times of losing everything you have when you have so little. Because what happens when a homeless person gets arrested? They get all their stuff taken away and thrown out. And to them, every little possession is a huge deal because they have so little to begin with. There's those things. There's a lot. And I'd overrun the length of possible video if I went into all of it. But yeah.
That's a very interesting proposal that you are presenting.
Yeah, but how do I get it out of my head and into wider society and attempt it?
Exactly. Well, it's happening. One of the obsessions that I have is with non-duality. I visualize a future of non-duality. I don't know why. Well, probably because that's the way I was raised. That was one of the concepts. And I think that for some reason I see the non-duality as something that can be more related with neuroplasticity. And the more we know about how the neurological system works, we may understand the problem with polarizing mind, extremism, and the relationship with the chemicals in the brain. And
I think you're right.
there is a relationship because extremism kind of triggers feel good chemicals, and the brain starts learning that cruelty releases those chemicals that make you feel powerful. So sometimes I see power as something that only exists in a mind with a lot of chemicals.
Well, I think our environmental chemical exposure and what we eat and all of that kind of stuff has a big play into that too. I think what we eat is huge on that. I can definitely say that over the last year or so, not quite a year yet, I've majorly changed my diet to eat very, very clean, and it's had a pretty big impact on my health, my weight, and my attitude and all that stuff. And there's a lot of evidence to support that diet plays a lot into a lot of depression and other autoimmune issues and a host of other things. So we're at the infancy of learning, the chemical side of life and understanding it, and the gut microbiome and all of that and all that entails. That's going to be huge. We're also at the early nascent stages of a boom in human longevity. All right, people are going to start living longer, and we're also going to find that exercise and time outside are both very important to human health. Yeah, so there's going to be big changes in the physiology of humans in terms of the environment that humans expose themselves to intentionally, and what's possible, and how much we know of what's possible to affect that way, and then what we create artificially to support human life for the long term. Um, there's big changes coming up in those regards. Another thing that I do that's been a coping mechanism for me throughout my life is read a lot of science, technology, and um, medical type magazines, periodicals, that type of stuff, and share stories from those. And the internet has been fantastic for that. You know, I've gotten into a long habit of sharing stories along those lines. And I can tell you, I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of articles along these lines: technology, alternative energy, physiology, medical technology, upcoming studies. There are many of those things, packed into here and shared as well with a small group of people who have similar interests over a long period of time. So when I talk, I'm not just pulling it out of the ether. I'm synthesizing from all those different sources that I've read over many years. Um, I think a lot of human invention and ingenuity is a matter of synthesis from ideas that already exist. And occasionally we get a flash of something new and different, or a different way to put things together. And that what makes humanity such good innovators.
Exactly.
I think that's at the heart of innovation, is being able to visualize a different way to put things together and do things.
Mm.
And that's Aquarian is all get out.
Yeah, and also is also very. I believe that is a very Aquarius trait that we have sometimes a sense of being stuck, and what gets us unstuck is precisely what you said: reading from different sources and from different publications from different fields.
Wide variety.
Uh-huh. That's what recalibrate this tendency of the mind of Aquarius to find a
Putting the antenna up.
exactly.
Not horns, antenna.
Mm. Well,
On that note, I'm going to go ahead and share a copy of my chart.
okay.
So give me a moment
Mhm.
and select tab to share. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that's it right there. And I think you should be seeing it now.
Mhm.
Are you are you able to see the chart?
Yes, I see it. Mm. So your stellium is mostly in the sixth house. Mhm. Hello?
Yeah, unfortunately, my web session crashed.
Uh,
So let me restart that screen share and see. Okay. It took me a minute to get back in here,
mhm,
but yeah, that screen crashed on me. The web page crashed. For the astrologers reading this, this chart is based on birth certificate, Beloit, Wisconsin, United States, 6:56 p.m. Central Time, and February 8th of 1962. That's the birth stats for the astrologer out there,
mhm,
where this chart was generated from. And so as you can see, we have the Aries moon there. That's the fiery part. I think that's, my wife says a lot of times, that was what keeps me somewhat grounded. With
mhm,
uh, one asteroid and 6 planets in Aquarius. Interestingly enough, I believe Pluto is right about now coming up on that Saturn in the 5th house.
mhm,
It's an interesting year. I've been listening to Chris Brennan's
mhm,
2026 year in preview. And then you can see the Virgo ascendant with Pluto on the ascendant just about. And then and Uranus, which is the ruler, the co-ruler of Aquarius, in opposition to the entire stellium,
mhm.
interestingly enough. And so there you go. But definitely going to be an interesting year. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. That's been on there long enough. And I'd say on that we have a couple of successful interviews, Yvette. I think I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to those watching and stop the recording.
Okay.